Dear viewers, subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video so YouTube can recommend you new stories and new chapters. If anything, you can always remove the like if you don't like the story. Thank you for your support, and here we go. But for what? Full story. You don't have to do that. That's not what she meant. Not really. We both know it has to be done. I have a duty. I carefully scrape off the last of the mustache with the razor and rinse it off. It's a straight razor, an old one. But when you're removing facial hair like I am, it's a much better choice than one of those chic, whatever they're called now, 5-blade ones. I've had a relaxed grooming standard for almost a year, so Winfield's long-hooked mustache was pretty thick. You can't have that in a parade uniform. Yes, I know. She presses herself against the doorframe where she stands and watches. Fear is frozen on her face. She doesn't want to think about it. She hates to think about it. It's going to be okay. She looks away. This is harder for her than it is for me, I think. It will be. I'll be back tonight and we'll have dinner. She smiles weakly, following me into the bedroom. How about we just get some pizza? The kids will love it. She tries to be positive and upbeat, but it's not easy. It'll work. She watches mesmerized as I pull on my shirt and tie, then my jacket. Then she walks over to the dresser and picks up a small silk pouch. It's a little over 1 inch by 2 inches, trimmed with black ribbon, and has a tiny black silk drawstring. She sewed it last night by hand. It's not something you can do on a machine. Her breath catches as she holds it out to me. She obviously can't think of anything to say that won't make things worse. We make small talk, but it's just filler until I see a black car pull up to the house and I have to leave. She holds out 3 brand new, neatly folded, stunningly white handkerchiefs for me to put in the inside pocket of my jacket as I leave. Private Malone just manages to slip out of the driver's seat as I descend the steps. He barely has time to get up before I open the passenger door. Good morning, Private. Good morning, Sergeant. I see her looking out the window as we drive away. I pretend I don't see her, and she pretends to believe I don't. There is silence before he begins to speak. We're meeting the van outside the church. I thought you might want to get there beforehand to watch. It's working. Is the van on schedule? Sergeant Callahan said to tell you that he's got everything locked and bolted in there. I nod. If Callahan says he has it, then he does. The church is almost 2 hours away, and Private Malone can't travel that distance without talking. The sergeant major said you shouldn't do that. We all have to do it. It's part of the job. Maybe he'll understand. If he does, it'll make him a better soldier. But he said you volunteered. Not really. I don't want to make myself look better than I am. I wasn't looking for that. I just didn't hide from it. They asked if I was willing to do it, and I don't have anything more important to do. In fact, there is little that can be called more important. After that, the conversation stalls. Even he can't find anything to talk about. For a guy who can talk for 20 minutes about different ways to cure ice cream headaches, that's something. As we get closer to the church, I can see that the surroundings are becoming more and more gloomy and gray. For a moment, I wonder if it is my imagination, but judging by the graffiti, it is clearly not. We are on the outskirts of New York City, in a particularly desolate neighborhood. Everything seems gray and gloomy, even though the sun is shining despite the oppressiveness of the day. When we stop in front of the church, I realize things are even worse than they seemed. The church is a small square structure, topped by a slightly drooping steeple, with peeling white paint and steep steps leading up to a narrow, cracked door. An 8-foot fence surrounded by barbed wire surrounds it. All it looks like it's missing is a machine gun nest. Stay here. Malone looks around and gets out of the car to stand at the front of it. There's no point in asking why I need it there. Without wheels, the car will be hard to get back in. There's a damn electric pole right in front of the gate, and if the gap were closer, I'd have to turn sideways to slip past it into the church. That's gonna be a problem. I walk up the uneven steps to the front door and enter. It's one large room decorated with black ribbon and dark purple flowers. A balding middle-aged black man in a black suit is doing something at the altar and turns to watch me approach. The wooden floor feels shaky and soft under my footsteps. The preacher looks critically at my uniform for a moment. I get no thanks from him for doing this. Like me, he considers it his duty. He doesn't waste time getting to know me. Do you see the electric pole? We can get through this. It's not going to be pretty, but we can do it. I couldn't wish for anything more. He then points to the place where the coffin is to be placed. I notice a niche at the side of the altar with a saxophone leaning in the corner. He follows my gaze. We don't have a piano, but his Uncle Charlie said he'd come over to play. He's pretty good, used to play in clubs. I want to say something nice, something helpful, but all I end up with is, "That'll do." He pauses for a second, pondering. You need him to play taps? No, we have a horn player. He will be waiting at the grave with the firing squad. I can see from his face that he doesn't like the words dismissal. I sense that he is truly a man of peace. Besides, it's a reminder of how things happened. Oh yeah, I guess so. Before I make the return trip, we'll go over the final details of how this will be done. Malone is talking to an elderly gray-haired black man in a black suit. He's clearly here for a funeral, but he's wearing a red and black brocade vest under his jacket. From my days of band class in junior high school, I recognized the smell of valve oil. You must be Uncle Charlie. He grins and holds out a strong, calloused hand. The private here says you're the man, at least for now. I told your private that the car would be fine today. He paused, shaking his head with a slight smile. I wouldn't try it tomorrow, but today, it'll be fine. He glanced across the street to the small grocery store across the street, where a large man sat in a chair. He wasn't there before, I would have noticed. Behind him, an axe handle is leaned against the wall. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. There's something about the way he looks at my uniform. Did you serve? 1967 to 1968. Pleiku in Vietnam. His face darkens. Different hole, and the shit is the same. He looks critically at my rack of ribbons. Looks like you've seen a lot of shit. A few. He nods toward Malone. He said you shouldn't do that. Like I told him, we all have to do it. A short, mirthless smile. Thanks anyway. Do you have a horn player? He's already at the grave. He nods, and I can't tell if he's relieved or disappointed. Maybe it's both. We wait in silence for the van to show up with the parts of my coffin. I settle them in and we discuss the problems. None of them are thrilled about the electric pole, but we'll make the best of it. Family members and friends are starting to pour in. Funeral black clothing is the order of the day. A few bright spots in pins or necklaces, but not much. My details are waiting in the van, and I'm standing at the gate. A reminder of everything. A few people look at me curiously, especially the kids, but they're not the only ones. It's hard to believe so many people will fit in here. I wonder if the preacher will remember to vacate the first pew on the left for us. If not, we'll adjust. When the flow of people stops, Uncle Charlie and I just stand together. He looks at me with a raised eyebrow. Don't mind the stares. They don't often see soldiers here, or white people. You're probably used to it by now. I smile myself. Mostly. We stand for a moment longer, watching as a thin shroud of clouds descends over the sun, leaving its glow gloomy and pale. It seems the world has finally realized what kind of day it is. My assistant leads everyone from the van, pulling white gloves over them. They line up, and we wait about 5 more minutes, right on schedule. The hearse stops in the perfect spot. All that's left to do is wait for the next of kin to gather. A couple of aunts hold 2 children in their arms, but the widow is wobbly at best. Captain Keisha Parrish catches my eye and shakes her head slightly. She is a casualty officer and tells me that the widow is not handling the situation in the best way. After hearing the story, I didn't expect her to say that. An older woman full of dignity notices our altercation and goes to help the captain carry the widow up the steps. There should be an operations officer on duty here, a brigadier general, I'm told, but he's not here, and I can only wait so long before we start. Carrying the flag coffin past the electric pole and up the steps is less of a fiasco than I expected. The hardest part is carrying it out. As sergeant, I escort the coffin into the darkness of the church. Technically, I'm here to give orders, but I don't say a word. We've done drills over the past few days, and all units are following the instructions of my assistant at the front. We are moving at a slow march, twice as slow as standard. It's like a dream. It's as if everything is happening underwater. Everything would be quiet if it weren't for the floor. It groans with a quiet dying sound with every step. I know without thinking that this sound will stay with us. Every man and woman on the detail will remember it forever. After the casket was placed and the honors were served, my detail and I lowered ourselves into a vacant pew. The preacher remembered it after all. It's a sea of black faces. The soldiers in my unit are the only white faces. I'm the darkest of us, and that's mostly because of sunburn. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the widow. Despite her family, despite Captain Parrish, she is as lonely as she can be. Even her family seems to be unconsciously pulling away from her, as if afraid of catching on. I study the pictures of the soldier on either side of the coffin. I don't know him. I've never seen him, and no one I know has either. But that's why we're here. That's why the family shuns the widow. That's why an even darker shroud hangs over this funeral. He was a sergeant first class on his second tour of duty in Iraq, which was unexpectedly extended without warning. He was serving in the Mosul area, a real hellhole. I learned the rest from Captain Parrish. It all came out of the widow's mouth in a terrible moment in her parlor. Keisha wasn't supposed to talk about it to anyone, but some burdens are too heavy to carry alone, and we've served together in other places. She was angry, lonely, and scared. The last time her husband had gone on duty, 3 of his squad had died, and she had seen their families crushed by that loss. It gnawed at her. She irrationally blamed him for those feelings. They tried to talk when they could, but every conversation ended in an argument. He was too distracted to care about her. At least, that's how it seemed to her. He was probably too preoccupied with getting through the next day. She was angry, lonely, and scared. Perhaps if she had talked to a chaplain or a psychologist, things would have been different. But she hadn't, and it wasn't. It all started at a church picnic. Charming guy, funny, good listener. He was harmless until he wasn't anymore. She'd met him a couple times at lunch, and he'd showered her with compliments. Eventually, of course, it happened. She was not thinking clearly because she had done something she thought she would never do. And as disappointed in herself as she was still angry and afraid, though she didn't feel so alone. Thus began months of secret meetings, though she certainly wasn't as secretive as she thought she was. She was as angry at herself as she was at her husband, and decided that she needed to deal with him. She wrote a letter, written entirely in one drunken evening, blaming him for everything and telling him about the affair. When her husband finally managed to reach the phone and make a call, things boiled over. When he protested, she lashed out at him, demanding a divorce and slamming the phone down in anger. She regretted it almost immediately, but there was no way she could take it back, not even to call back and try to talk calmly. On the other side of the world, a strangely calm sergeant first class walked over to a smelly brown and white porte-cochere, sat inside, pointed the muzzle of an M4 at himself, and pulled the trigger. When that happens, they can't afford to bring in new porta-potties, so they take them away, clean them, and quietly stick them somewhere else. Next time you find yourself in a porta-potty in a war zone, look up. If there's a small hole in the roof, probably around the back third of the roof, you'll know it. Sometimes there are 2. The widow, not knowing she was alone, waited for him to call and they could talk, maybe figure something out. Instead, a colonel in dress uniform and a chaplain appeared at her door. I don't know how the details got out. Maybe he had a friend on the squad, or maybe people just linked the suicide to her not-so-secret activities. It didn't really matter, though. Eventually, the rumors got around. People knew. And the guy? He got in his car and drove away. I never found out what happened to him. That's why we're here. Units don't bury their suicides. Suicide is contagious within the unit, but not so much outside the unit. I don't think anyone knows why. Maybe it's kind words. Maybe it's the image of the funeral. I don't know for sure, but it's true. So units ask other units to pay their last respects to their own. That's how we ended up here. Next scene. I listened to the saxophone for a while. Uncle Charlie is really good, better than I expected. The female soldier sitting next to me is trembling. We're crammed in here shoulder to shoulder, so there's no hiding it. Tears are streaming down her face. Without saying anything, I reach into my jacket, pull out one of my new handkerchiefs, and hand it to her. In the middle of the service, a brigadier general arrives and slips inside. He tries to do so without causing trouble, but he is given away by the creaking of the floor. As soon as I see him, I realize we have a real problem. Someone, probably in some protocol office, decided that a black officer was the best choice. They probably decided that he had something in common, or at least that he looked like family. And here's the problem. He's almost a perfect match to the pictures that are in the photo. Captain Parrish notices it too, but the widow looks at him with horror as well. She spends the rest of the service shooting her eyes at him. The procession is successful. Captain Parrish fends off the brigadier as best he can, squeezing between them and preventing him from speaking to the widow. We manage to dignify the coffin under a grey-iron sky, despite the electric pole, and load it into the hearse for the all-too-short trip to the cemetery. Staff Sergeant Callahan meets me there while the details self-organize. We're all wearing sunglasses despite the clouds. His fire support team and National Guard bugler are at just the right distance, posing like statues. I hand him a silk pouch sewn by my wife, and he carefully places 3 polished brass rounds in it, closes it, and hands it to me. It will be placed inside the folded flag. It would be nice if the rounds were from the salute, but it is not possible to do so in time. The family arrives with the hearse and the brigadier. In this slightly better light, the resemblance between her husband and the foreman isn't as obvious, but it's too late for the widow. She's already caught the connection, and there's no escaping it. At last I can hear the brigadier speaking. Someone upstairs made a serious error in judgment. His voice is cultured, the result of expensive schools and growing up with money. His skin color may be up to someone else's standards, but he has far less in common with the people here than I do. He may have never even seen a food stamp, and the family clearly feels it and resents it. A chasm has opened up that only seems to widen with every step. The military graveside service is quite simple at first glance. The preacher gives a speech, followed by a salute, followed by taps, then the folding and presentation of the flag. It's also one of the hardest things in the world to do. I don't even hear the preacher. He's facing me, and I'm too busy watching the widow fall apart. When the preacher is done, we rise and salute. My detail holds the flag suspended over the casket, and I hold up my hand for the salute. I can hear Callahan commanding a firing squad. The first shot rings out, and I see the widow flinch and freeze. The second shot shakes her, as if she were a target herself. When the third goes off, I know. She doesn't hear the gunman's salute. She hears the muffled plastic sound of a single shot from an M4 in a latrine half a world away, over and over again. She struggles with herself throughout the performance of the tact, but she only partially succeeds. My assistant folds the flag perfectly and slips a black silk pouch with 3 polished cartridges under the last fold. After accepting the banners, I walk over to hand them to the foreman and realize that he's not doing as well. He looks lost, and I have to quietly remind him of the procedure. Salute. Accept the flag and give me time to salute, and then approach the widow. He freezes, but picks himself up and manages until the widow recoils from him, nearly falling off her chair. He steps closer and she begins to shake almost uncontrollably. He's supposed to move on to the next relative in line, but he seems to have forgotten that and stays put. Captain Parrish casts a pleading glance at me, but I am already stepping forward, stiff, motionless. "Sir," he's looking at me. I manage to get him to hand the flag back to me, and I turn back, expecting to move down the line. As the foreman steps back, the widow straightens up and reaches for the flag. I look nothing like her dead husband, and that's what matters. I hand her the flag with the words, "Ma'am, this flag is presented on behalf of a grateful nation in appreciation for the honorable and faithful service your loved one has rendered." After my final chilling salute, everything finally goes smoothly, and the funeral is finally mercifully over. The brigadier practically runs to his car and driver, dropping only a few sympathetic words. Bugler, a master sergeant in the National Guard, has risen, holding his ornate silver pipe, and we watch him with disgust as he removes his gloves. A small, slightly slouching figure approaches us from the other side, lips compressed, head bobbing. It's not just us watching, but most of the crowd, and that's exactly what leaves a bad impression. The old lady straightens up and looks me in the eye. "Does your group have to go too? We're having a small reception in the church basement. We have chicken and cookies and sweet potato pie." She's a little formal, perhaps concerned that I don't understand what's going on. that I can't feel the anger and resentment slowly building. We have to head back. It's a 2-hour drive and we need to stay on schedule. Callahan has to go. Rifles need to be returned to the armory. I look back at Bugler. If you said sweet potato pie, I think we have a little time. She smiles a genuine smile. Althea, great aunt. Todd Doring, please let me walk you to your car. I extend my hand, and she graciously accepts it. Gentlemen. Not really. I'm not an officer, just a sergeant. She looks at my left hand. Too bad you're married. It is. I guess you're in serious trouble. She chuckled softly, slyly. I was thinking about my great-granddaughter, but I was a devil on wheels in my day, and maybe I liked white boys sometimes. The reception was much more pleasant than I could have expected. Uncle Charlie and the bugler apparently managed to find a drummer somewhere, and the resulting blues and jazz was just fine. We stay a little over 3 hours, and Private Malone ends up getting the phone number of a certain great-granddaughter. The sweet potato pie is incredible, but the widow remains in the shadows, sunken and silent, despite Captain Parrish's best efforts. The next scene, just as I get to the top step, the door is opened by my wife. Her eyes are a little red, but she'll never admit she's been crying. I hold out one of my 2 handkerchiefs to her anyway. She's been my with or on shield girlfriend for 20 years. We made a pact. I promised never to take me alive. She promised not to cry in front of the cameras if I died. She vowed to wait until she was sure she had a live feed, and to call every soldier to avenge me. Funerals are painful. She's used to me disappearing into some corner of the world, used to me coming back without telling her what happened. But funerals are a constant reminder that I'm human too, that I can be the one who isn't fast enough or confident enough or lucky enough. Did it go well? I talk about the funeral, about the widow, about the foreman, even about Althea. She smiles. She has an aunt just like her. She has... Later, after pizza, when the kids are asleep, we seek each other out, desperately trying to remind each other how we feel, how we've always felt. 2 weeks later, there's a frantic knock on the door. My wife opens it and ushers Keisha in. She doesn't really care much for Keisha. She's not jealous in the traditional sense, just jealous of the time we spend together. But she hugs Keisha, and it takes me a second to catch the gasping, shuddering sound. My wife sits her down on the couch, and we wait for her to catch her breath. She died. I went to visit her, and they told me. Unlike me, unlike everyone else, the casualty officer stays on the case, continues to help survivors. Even yesterday she looked better. She was talking about the future, about children. My wife reassures her and nods her head toward the hall closet. My dress lies there. I pull out the last untouched handkerchief and hold it out for her to give to Keisha. According to her, she sent her children to her sister's house so that they could wash themselves. Then she took all the pills she could find at home and drank almost the entire bottle of vodka. Keisha stays on the couch for the night, and my wife and I sleep in the huge upholstered chair next to her. It's not the most restful place, but sometimes there are more important things than sleep. Well, hello, dear viewer. As we dive into the depths of this tangled narrative, we are confronted with a complex web of emotion, duty, and the human condition. At the heart of this excerpt is the deep struggle faced by people experiencing loss, betrayal, and the weight of responsibility. The protagonist, burdened with the duty of attending the funeral of a fallen soldier, goes through a series of poignant interactions that emphasize the complexity of human relationships. From the solemn rituals of military traditions to the intimate moments shared with grieving loved ones, each scene serves as a testament to the tangled tapestry of emotions woven into the fabric of our lives. At the center of this story is the widow, a figure haunted by the specters of regret and betrayal. Her journey, intertwined with themes of infidelity and loss, serves as a poignant reminder of the fragile nature of human connection. Through her struggles, we are confronted with the harsh realities of love and longing, as well as the devastating consequences of uncontrolled emotions. Moreover, the juxtaposition of military protocol with personal suffering emphasizes the internal tension between duty and humanity. As the protagonist copes with the demands of his role, we are reminded of the profound sacrifices made in the name of service to others, and how these sacrifices can affect the human psyche. In essence, this passage serves as a powerful exploration of the human experience, offering insight into the complexities of grief, love, and the indomitable spirit of resilience. Through a rich tapestry of emotions and vivid character portrayals, it invites us to reflect on our own relationships, struggles, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Remember, all full uncensored versions of our stories are on Patreon,